I've got something which is truly game-changing to share with you. You see, I recently got my hands on the Tamron 35-150mm lens. And let me tell you, it's not just a lens, it's a perspective-altering experience. Even to the point where I'm considering selling 2 of my Sony lenses, including this one. Now, we're constantly on the hunt for the best lens to help us capture the moments. It's really made me rethink everything that much. So join me as we dive into the world of the Tamron 35-150, and by the end of this video, you'll see why this lens is the lens to buy for myself and so many other people out there. By the way, if you find this video useful, hit the subscribe button, because the bigger the channel gets, the bigger and better I can make these videos for you. Now, this Tamron lens has been on my mind for quite a while. However, not going to deny, I have overlooked it a fair few times. For a long time now, I've used prime lenses, especially when it comes to my wedding photography. The main reason I chose to go from the zoom lenses to the prime lenses originally is because prime lenses generally have a wider aperture. Therefore, it's not just about the depth of field, but the amount of light which can enter the camera. But this one zoom lens is seriously making me consider going back to zoom lenses, or just having this one lens to do everything. Now, the Tamron 35-150 is a variable aperture lens, meaning that as you go from 35mm at f2, by the time you get to 150mm, it will become f2.8. Now, first up, let me say, if you're worried about the depth of field, don't worry. As long as you have a little bit of distance between your subject and the background, the compression of the lens will do everything else for you. All you need to do is look at lenses such as the 70-200 f2.8. This type of lens has been around for quite a while and is still widely used. We all love lenses like this, so I don't want that to be the reason for you to think, nah, this ain't the right lens for me. One of my biggest concerns regarding the aperture of the Tamron was the usability in certain situations. As I've already mentioned, one of the main reasons I use prime lenses now is because I like the wider aperture to allow more light into the lens. The more light that comes through the lens and hits the sensor, the better the shutter speed can be and the lower the ISO can be. So I decided to put this lens to the test, and at first, I'll be honest, I wasn't quite sold on the idea. But the more I used this lens and adapted the way I work, the more I grew to love it. When you're at 35mm, you can shoot wide open at f2, which is perfectly usable. No major drawbacks at that point. But once you get to 40mm, the lens will go from f2 to f2.2. Now, let's be honest, having 5mm to play with at f2 isn't really much. However, I would sooner have it than not have it. And it's certainly better than being restricted to just having f2 at 35mm. Once you get to 40mm, you have f2 all the way to 59mm. At 60mm, it becomes f2.5 all the way up to 79mm, and 80 and beyond becomes f2.8. And I did think at first, this isn't going to be a lens that I'm going to feel comfortable with shooting inside at them kind of apertures. Yes, you can use natural window light. Yes, you can use flashes if you wish. But when I was using it, I never really found myself shooting anything above 80-85mm, so I could always stay at f2.5 or below. You may be different, but for the kind of places I do a lot of photography indoors, there's just not enough room to be able to use the full range of the lens. But regardless, if you can look past that minor thing, this lens is phenomenal. The amount of photos you can take with just the one lens is obscene. No more changing lenses. Even between 2 zoom lenses, you can shoot a whole wedding, a whole event with just this one lens and one camera. Now, the autofocus on this lens feels pretty much as good as what any of the Sony lenses do. And if it isn't, for any of the situations I found myself in, it always kept up. The lens uses a technology from Tamron called VXD, which stands for Voice Coil Extreme Torque Drive. I can see why they call it VXD. Pretty much VXD is the use of linear motors rather than screw motors, which are notoriously slower. And these linear motors are very similar technology to what Sony use in their own native lenses. The lens also has a USB port which you can use to update the firmware of the lens directly from your laptop or your computer without having to use a camera body. Now, this is all well and good, but the USB port doesn't come with a cover. Now, I've been outside with this lens in possibly the worst weather I've ever shot a wedding in. Literally an outdoor ceremony in the rain. And after using this lens, the USB port still worked. Maybe I was lucky, but regardless, you don't want to get any rain, dirt, sand, grit, pretty much anything which shouldn't be in a USB port in the USB port. Something to be aware of. Now there is one thing we should really talk about, and that's the size and the weight. The size of this lens is bigger than any of the 24-70s out there on the market. It's also heavier than any of the 24-70s out there on the market. And it's even heavier than this original 70-200 from Sony. However, it's not quite as big. The Tamron lens barrel also extends as you start zooming in, and as you will already know, as you do that, the balance point of the lens changes. So if you're wanting to use this lens with the camera on any of the gimbals, it is going to make it a little bit trickier. However, it's not impossible. In short, it's a big boy, and you're gonna know you've got it. Despite all of this, the build quality of the Tamron lens is really good. I've used a fair few Tamron lenses over the recent months, and every time I've been fairly surprised by what the build quality is like. And in the UK, you can pick one of these up for around £1,799. However, if you want to get a used one, you can pick it up a fair bit cheaper. Now that £1,799 is getting up there to where the Sony Gmaster price is. But with the versatility that you get from this lens, it's definitely a good option in comparison to the Sony Gmasters. So here's my genuine take of this lens after using it for the last couple of months. With me being in the wedding industry for photography and videography, me and my business partner have seriously sat down and considered, and are still considering, selling both the 24-70 and 70-200 when it comes to video just for this Tamron. And when it comes to the photography part of the business, I'd consider it as well, especially if I was still shooting on the 24-70 and the 70-200 religiously. Buying the Tamron 35-150 is a huge improvement over having two lenses which pretty much do the same thing. If anything, the Tamron has a massive advantage with the aperture. You can seriously shoot an entire wedding, an entire project with just this one lens. Yes, you aren't gonna have a 35mm f1.4, a 50mm f1.2, and an 85 1.4, but you're also not gonna have a bag full of lenses that you've got to carry around all day. Just a little side note as well, Samyang have now brought out a 35-150 f2.2.8. However, I have no idea how well it performs in person. So if you're at this stage of the video and you're thinking, yes, that Tamron looks really, really good, I would recommend doing a little bit of research and seeing what the Samyang's like in comparison, because you could save a little bit more money. If I can get hold of one, I'll make a video about it. Now, if you're still thinking, no, I don't want a zoom lens, I'm much more comfortable with the primes, especially when it comes to the weddings, then I recommend you watch this video right here. However, if you want to stick around and watch some more stuff to do with the Tamron lenses, watch this video right here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.